Um, the way this agreement shows some changes in blue, which are changes from the previous version that was emailed to the council, I think about 3 months ago. Might have only been 2 months ago, but the changes in blue show the differences from then till now. I guess it might be helpful for the council to give me a little guidance. Do you want to go through each provision? Do you want to focus on the changes? Do you want to have a high-level discussion to start with? I'm not sure exactly what you'd like me to talk about to start with.
You have comment?
Okay. So let me just hit some of the highlights then.
Councilor Barker?
First of all, I think I need to get it out there that I have to claim a conflict of interest on this. Just making that public. I am a Barker. If anyone was doubting, yeah, I know. Second, John, I think it'd be good if you explained to everyone why there's an agreement with the Barkers. I came to you, I think it was after the last council meeting in July, wondering why we even needed an agreement with the Barker family, or why can't we just do an ordinance, and you explained why it actually makes sense to do it with a family or an entity in the city.
So the reason that an agreement works better than an ordinance, if we're trying to establish a specific pattern moving forward, is an ordinance could be changed by an upcoming council at any point, just like as we just did. We had a resolution we passed 2 weeks ago that we amended tonight. The same thing could happen with an ordinance. With an agreement, it makes it a little harder to amend because it requires more parties to get involved. This agreement in particular was, I think, conceptualized in the meetings with the family. Probably one of the individuals today clearly expressed, I think, that the intent of the agreement from when it was first, I don't want to say conceived, but as it started taking form, was seeing if there was a middle ground or a meeting point that everyone could kind of come together on what the use of the facility would be. In those discussions, because it's not an open meeting, there were just 2 council members present, not 5, and so that's, technically that's not a majority of the vote. But that's kind of where the agreements came from. I think there's several items in the agreement that it's trying to look at. Some of those have been identified tonight. Parking is obviously a big issue. How many cars, how many tickets? Our current ordinance that we have says for 4 tickets per stall, and that's the way our ordinance is.
Not counting on street parking.
But that doesn't count on street parking. The way this agreement is written is it was, when it was first presented, was 3 units per stall, but you could count, or 3 tickets per stall, but you could count on street parking. It's now been amended to say 4 and still includes on street parking. There's also a provision in here down right here that says there wouldn't be more than 367 stalls installed inside the curb of the park. The best way to show or to conceptualize that is that's everything that's currently green that's in the alfalfa or the hollow or the current park. However, the city put parking stalls in there, it wouldn't exceed that 367 number. That number is based on an actual count of the stalls that are planned in the park that was recommended by the Barker Park Committee, and that includes the 126 that are in the south portion. There's currently 127 striped, but there's a couple that are a little too small, and so we're working on getting those restriped and so we lose a stall with that. It does not include the proposed additional parking in the southern portion of the park. In fact, this agreement, I think there was at one point 60 stalls proposed there. That's not part of the number that makes up the 367. The other kind of big thing is the event regulations. The way this agreement is written, is that small events, which would be events of less than 400 people, and they'd be ticketed events, there wouldn't be a number of events that you could exceed in a calendar month, with the exception that our current city ordinance says it shouldn't be more than 3 per week. So in theory, you could have 12-ish events in a month that are small events, assuming they were all small events. Then it makes a larger event, or it's a medium event, between 400 and 800 people ticketed. And those, the way this is written, it says there's 3 days that those can happen a month. And then large events is above 800. And then there's some question on, I think, whether it's 1,200, whether it's 1,600. At one point, I know that in the past, I think that the capacity that I've mentioned on several occasions, that it was kind of always the anticipated like max capacity, from at least that I was in conversations I was involved in, was 2,000. That number's not represented here, because I think it was tied more closer to the parking number and figuring that out. The hours, it was recommended that it just be set to the park hours. What we currently do, if someone's in the park after 10 p.m., then they're expected to leave. It'd be that similar approach. I myself have been out checking on city facilities after 10 p.m. and had police officers stop to see what I was doing. Luckily, they were happy to talk about what was going on as well in the parks. There are some limits under sound equipment that talks about limiting essentially changing and moving using the same measurement point as the city ordinance, which is the property lines, and using that decibel level. The way this is written, it says dBA or dBc. I know that there's still some question on which is the appropriate level, and that some events might be measured better in one scale as opposed to the other. And so as this is written, it's there to cover both ranges at that level. There's also some language about the city doing some studying on those sound levels, and coming up with some future stuff, or future information, future recommendations. Fixed seating would be capped at the 497 that are currently proposed for the facility. As you know, those haven't officially been greenlit by the council in the form of an actual funding amount. Fencing, there's some provisions in here that establish when the fencing needs to be open and unlocked. I know that we've talked a lot on the council, that the council's talked a lot about leaving that unlocked and at what hours. The biggest thing we've done in this is we've moved the hours that it's opened back to 10 a.m. as opposed to 7 a.m. when most of our parks open, just because most of the parks, the gates are actually opened by the officers or the parks crew as they go around the city kind of prepping for the day, and we didn't want to be in violation of the agreement if the park wasn't open in time. This section G that talks about the revisiting of the location of the ticket booth and concession stand, that's kind of a concept. There were some ideas thrown around in some of the discussions about possibly reducing the size of that building, maybe no concession stand, things like that. There was some concerns, I think, that came to the discussion from neighbors or from those involved, that having that big of a building kind of up on the top of that hill is not a very good spot for it. And so there's a lot of discussion about the possible locations of that. Then there's a bunch of what you'd call boilerplate language, essentially paragraphs 5 all the way down to paragraph 14 and 15 are those kind of attorney provisions that just gets thrown in documents that don't. They're more there to. They're kind of the best example is the counterparts provision that's in here. It basically says not everyone has to sign the exact same the exact same document, as long as everyone signs a paper. then it counts as the whole agreement. So in theory, if there, I think on this agreement, there's 15 signature lines. And so you could have 15 different documents signed, and together they would be one agreement. So that's the type of provision that's thrown in there. There's an expiration date. Under paragraph 16, there's two alternatives that have been kind of proposed. One is that the agreement just lasts for 3 years and then it expires. And then the other one is a thing that says if there's not a new agreement reached in that 3-year period, that then it would extend to 2036, which is, roughly 18 years. And then there's signature pages. So any questions about what the language is? I'm the one who drafted this up based on the meetings. I was there with the mayor and the two council members, so I was kind of scribbling notes and trying to capture it all as best I could. I know that some of the alternatives have been with the back and forth between me and members of the Barker family, and so the council hasn't made an official action on this, and it's before you for discussion. Any other questions? Anything I didn't highlight?
So just out of curiosity, John, when it talks about, I guess it would be B3, 1,600 tickets sold shall be limited to 1 day per calendar. Why would we have need to have 1,600 tickets sold?
So it'd be the type of event. So there's two things I forgot to mention, and I'm glad you asked this question. So non-ticketed events wouldn't be capped on a size because we couldn't regulate who's coming in and out. And then the other one is like a festival type of event. A good example of that would be like Cherry Days. Technically, it's not a ticketed event, but that type of event where you'd have a lot of people in the park at any given time. And so the way this is written is if it's a festival, meaning people can come in, the amount of tickets or the amount of people allowed in the venue would be based on kind of the average or the max at any given point in time. So if they were holding an event like that, the best example I can think of is the Salt Lake Arts Festival that they do down in this downtown, right on the city-county building block. They actually charge admission, and if something like that was to be held here, then the people who were charging admission would have to make sure that we stayed under the cap of whatever size event it was supposed to be. So if it was a 1,600 person event, then they'd have to make sure the crowd size was below that at any time during the day. There is some hard parts with that, trying to count people in and out and keep it really really accurate. So my guess is that that's the type of event that would draw in the 1,600 people to give you a lot of flex space. But also there is a chance. I went to an event at the Draper Amphitheater that was Colby Calais, and I think they sold 1,500 tickets to that show. So in theory, this would allow that type of an event to come to the facility. Or if we did a symphony event or something like that we actually needed to charge tickets for to help cover the cost, that was a city-sponsored event, then that would allow that as well. So it would still be, right now, it'd still be limited by the parking standard as well as the ticket sales standard. So right now we couldn't host a 1,600 person ticketed event because we don't have enough parking stalls. But in theory, when everything's built out, we could be close to that number. At least with the 367 stalls, we could exceed the 800 ticket sales number. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, I'm just trying to work this through my mind. It doesn't seem, even if we used Fruitland for parking, which I know on this agreement it talks about it being regulated by safety, but 1,600 ticket just seems a lot. I mean, if we're going to be limited to 367 parking spots.
Well, so the difference is, under this agreement, we could count on-street parking, which would include 2,600, and this park side of Barker Parkway and Deer Meadows Drive, as well as anything that was safe on Fruitland. And I emphasize safe because there's right-of-way width issues there.
Right.
And I think that it's typically, in fact, I think this agreement doesn't count Fruitland because of the concerns there for the road width. So in theory, you can get over the 400 stalls if you add 2,600 and then the Deer Meadows and Barker Parkway area, because people would be parked next to the curb, but there wouldn't be stalls inside the park, if that makes sense.
Because 1,600 tickets at 4 tickets per car would mean we'd have to have, stalls for 400 vehicles.
Yeah.
You'll need more than 400.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think.
I'm just saying that as a minimum.
Right.
If we go by our ordinance, we'd have to have at least 400 parking stalls.
Right. But I also have heard an argument. You go to Ogden Amphitheater and you got just as many people outside the event listening to music as inside the event. So your 1,600 could turn into 3,200, and then we really don't have the capacity. So just something to think about. Yeah.
Oh, and just one other, it's a side note, and it deals with your comment, Councilman Barker, about a conflict of interest. The way the state defines it is a financial conflict of interest. So I would probably say that it's a different conflict, but I'm just in case anyone questions that.
I had someone bring up today that it's convenient that the council has a Barker on the council, so. And it's on Facebook, and I don't read Facebook, but I had it brought up, so I just thought I'd get it out there.
Well, it is convenient because we like you.
Well, thank you. You guys voted me here.
Exactly.
I think the 1,600 is too many. Myself. Because, we can't, we're never going to be able to, it's like you say, if you're standing there punching a little, what's that little counter, it's going to be hard to regulate people getting in. But if we had a lesser amount of tickets going out, maybe that would help a little bit.
So if it's, in theory, at an actual ticketed event, it'll be easier to regulate people coming in and out because there'll be fixed points of entry. But in a festival, it's harder to regulate because typically at a festival, you're going to have some entries, but you're going to have a lot of unregulated exits. So especially in case of a fire or other event, people can get out without going through choke points. And there's some fire standards for how big your gates have to be for emergency exits and stuff like that take that into consideration.
So, John, or Mayor, the 16 of it, it's like that's just for no ticket events. But we're still not, you cannot sell 1,600 tickets because we don't have the parking. So the parking still regulates that till the other part of the park is built with those extra stalls. Right? So it's not like we're going to till all this is done, all of a sudden have one large event of selling tickets for 1,600 people. Right?
Yeah, and right now, with the way the parking is set up under our ordinance, we're essentially limited to 504 tickets for any ticketed event. So.
Yeah, that's a 4. Down to 3.
There.
Yes.
Yeah. To start with, Rod, I appreciate your frankness. I really do. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. If anything, people ought to know that I appreciate frankness more than I do beating around the bush. It's how I communicate, and it's the communication style I prefer. So I appreciate you being frank and honest. I'll bear the load for initiating the process early on. Your target is right on and right here. I'm the one, and I'll make it clear that my reasons are the same that I have now, and that's that I hate to see the conflict here in our community, and looking for a way to lessen that conflict as much as possible. And in that, I've come to realize that I was a little bit headlong in initiating that, knowing what I know now and understanding what I've heard from the other side, if you will, of the issue. I have become convinced that we don't have enough information to make a sound agreement that benefits or is fair to either side. And that's how I feel, and that's why I have said in the last couple of weeks that I feel like the thing to do is to limit the use of the amphitheater for now to just city events. The play, the city band. It wouldn't be rented out to anybody, any amplified. We'd have to look at whether or not we could allow some wedding receptions, something like that it could be rented out for a wedding reception where there wouldn't be, the heavy amplified music or anything like that. But until we get, I think there's, Tiffany, where are you? I thought I saw you here earlier. What do we have, 2 or 3 next year? We have Cherry Days. We'll have probably a play. We probably won't have a play, so we'd have Cherry Days, and what else might there be? Not a lot. We have discussed, thank you, Tiffany. We have discussed, trying to get some additional information, getting it built out on the interior so that we have the changing rooms and the bathrooms and all that so that it's a functional facility. And then getting back together and deciding what's the best use. How do we use this thing in a way that benefits the city, but also, as Rod, you put eloquently, protects the neighborhood, and several people put. I think those are both valid and reasonable expectations. I don't think it's in the residents' interest to come to an agreement when we don't have sufficient information. And again, I'll squarely bear the load for rushing into this and initiating things before I had enough information to really take the charge and do that. I mean, you can put that squarely on my shoulders. But I don't want to compound the mistake by making an agreement that doesn't necessarily serve either side as good as it should for the residents. So my proposal would be, John, I asked John to getting lockjawed here, to come up with a draft ordinance. Do you have that, John?
Yeah. That
would essentially prohibit the use of the amphitheater pretty much until after next summer's events, or the amphitheater interior is completed, whichever is latest. So if the events are done but next summer, but the interior isn't completed, we wouldn't do anything until the interior was completed. If the interior is completed before, but we haven't had next summer's events, then we would come back and look at what makes sense for us to have. I think it gives us more information, more time to do research on the sound and all those kinds of things that are important, and that sets us up to have something in place for the 2020 year. And in the meantime, it's not an overused or underused. It's still an in-process facility where we're trying to get the interior built out and get an idea of what it can be, what it should be, and what we all can agree on. And I think the other point to that as well is regardless of who runs, who doesn't run, who's elected, and who's not elected next year in the elections, you'll have a brand new council. Some of us might not be here. Some of us will still be here. Blake is the only guarantee to be here next year. So you'll have at least 20% that is continuous, but you might have an 80% turnover. And I think it would be more incumbent on that council to make that agreement after we've got some time under our belt and we've got it finished out and it's ready to be used. So that would be the proposal that I would suggest. You can see what it's out there.
Well, and
you want to read that, John?
Well, in this, let me kind of summarize the language. Obviously, it's not in any sort of an official form because it's not being voted on tonight. It's, that type of thing. So This is currently in our amphitheater ordinance. There is a paragraph F, and this is a modified version of that basically says until the inside of the building is finished with, and lights and stage lighting and things like that, the only thing the city could rent the facility for would be the front apron and it'd be for things like wedding receptions. We've had a few people who want to had like employees come and watch a movie night with their families or things like that. So it'd be that type of rental. It would require them to use the city speakers, which are not powerful enough to overwhelm the neighborhood without blowing them out. And so that would kind of be the catch-all at the bottom is the idea that they have to use our sound equipment. But this would allow some usage of the facility without turning it completely over. And from my perspective, for a safety perspective, I don't think we should rent the actual building out to anybody that isn't a city-sponsored event till the sprinklers are in and finished lighting, things like that. I just feel like we don't want rooms that don't have lights if we're not there to closely supervise the activities. So, yeah. And just so the council's aware, I think Councilman Swanson saw this at the same time all of you did. I finished it up about 4:45 this afternoon.
I saw it as I sat down here.
In fact, he came in and he said, "Hey, what's this?" and threw it at me. And I said, "Wait, no, that's what you asked for." So this is just my initial gut check at it. I did talk to Tiffany about it. And Tiffany's here and can answer any questions about the agreement as well. I mean, obviously, she has probably a better understanding of the way this type of recreational facility will function in the city, because that's her job.
Can we hear from Tiffany, please?
While Tiffany's coming up, go ahead, Tiffany, come on up. I also want to make it very clear, Rod, you mentioned this in your comments, why haven't any of the city officials, and I heard my name.
I purposely left all names out.
I understand, but it was clear who you were referring to, and it's okay.
I don't
appreciate
respond on
that.
Facebook.
What's that?
I don't respond on Facebook.
I know, and Carl doesn't do Facebook, and Blake rarely, and Cheryl doesn't, so it's pretty
So it's, yeah.
but that's okay. I want to make it public that even though we have some pretty, at times, polar opposite ideas and opinions about things, I have yet, and I want this to be on the record, I have yet to have a negative encounter with Annie Barker. Not any of the kids, not any of the grandkids, the cousins. I have yet to have any, to my face, ugly words said, and I've never had anybody not extend a hand of fellowship when I reach out to greet somebody and shake hands, even though I know they're madder than wet hens at me. I've never had that, so I want to be on record to know that you have a class act family. Your parents did a great job, and your aunt and uncle did a great job of raising their kids. It's a fabulous family with high moral standards, and I appreciate that. And I want everybody to know that. And if I see something on Facebook from here on out, I'm going to get myself in trouble, but I'm going to call people out. I try not to call people out. But I will do that in the future when I see those. And if you find one, because it's just there's too many lately to read them all. If somebody finds one, you let me know. But I want that on record that my interactions with the Barker kids on either side of the family have just been top-notch. Even the younger ones, the grandkids, have been top-notch, and they're good people. And this much of what this city is because of the quality of the kind of people that founded this place. It's a great place. Tiffany, John had a question for you.
Yes, Cheryl.
Or Cheryl did.
So what would this agreement do, or this, I don't know, what would it do, or how would we use it or not use it, or your thoughts?
I think with what I'm reading, this is the first time I've seen this written down tonight. But I think it would allow for some use of the facility, as over the last 7 or 8 weeks, I've received at least one call a week from companies, from individuals, from small groups, from lots of people in the community who are excited about this facility and would like to use it. But at the same time, like John said, I hesitate to rent out the interior of the building where it's unfinished. But I think there's still a lot of use that can be done with the apron of the facility and the outside that's there for smaller events, weddings, as long as we make sure that we are aware of the size and scope of what those events ought to be.
So like piano recitals, dance recitals, little kids.
Yeah, I think
Students.
whatever they can fit on that outside apron there. When you open up those doors, we open up some security and safety issues with things that are not complete on the interior of the building. It doesn't have lighting throughout. It doesn't have power throughout. It's got stubs of piping and plumbing and things that are just sticking up out of the ground that we made special efforts to cover and take care of for the show that we did. But I think it would be good for the community and good for the people who are obviously interested in it for us to be able to rent out that outer portion of the facility as it is usable.
Thank you.
Mayor, I'd like to ask if, and not to, don't need to hear from everybody, but I would like to ask maybe to have some of the Barker family tell us maybe some of their thoughts, concerns about the agreement and what they think of this other proposal, since this is the first time we've seen it and the Barkers haven't had a chance to really see it, and I just kind of like to get their feel. Now, I'd like to suspend the rules and do that, and I'd make a motion to do that, and I'd like to see how if the council feels the same way, and if not, that's fine. I'll visit with them later. But I'd like to limit it to the Barkers. I mean, I don't want to apologize to everybody else, but just want to hear from them right now, if that's all right. So that would be a proposal I make, or however we do that if we could.
I'll second it.
A second. All in favor?
You got to be quicker.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I don't feel like you have to. I would just like to hear if some of the Barkers have anything they'd like to say about this agreement, or good or bad, or how they feel about it. Now, I understand you haven't seen this either until now, because we just got it right before the meeting, but if any of you have anything to say about some of the stuff in this agreement.
I would just make a couple of quick observations.
Probably need you at the mic, my friend. So.
I would just make a couple of quick observations, see all this for the first time too. First of all, I would say I think the discussion has been very healthy for the city tonight. You know, not just for the Barker family. I would think the agreement really is more with the city of North Ogden than with one family. Mr. Swanson, thank you for your words tonight. My only comments about the whole agreement, I don't think I have any issues with this. You know, it's been built, it needs to be used. It's kind of an empty, hollow shell if all it does is just sit there for the residents of those streets to see every day. Blake, I have the same concern that you do. I think 1,600's a lot of tickets. I'm happier with 1,200. Beyond that, I don't really have any concerns, Carl. Okay.
Thank you.
I have felt that the agreement would help to resolve much of the contention in the neighborhood. That it would put in writing numbers, intentions, purposes, as if we were making a mission statement for what this amphitheater, what this park is to be. And that by doing that, it's not just with our family, but that it's our family trying to negotiate it for the entire community. In supporting the arts, yes, it needs to be done. Yes, we need some time to look at it. But by not having any kind of agreement in place, we leave it hanging. So again, the fears, the worst case scenarios can all happen. And they can happen with a bulldozer turning the 34 rest of the acres into a parking lot and bringing in the crowds. That I feel like if we don't put something down, then we just kind of leave it open to whatever. It's why we have city codes and ordinances. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor? Mayor,
Yeah, he's got one coming up.
sorry.
I think we're all just kind of happy that finally a discussion is happening. That really it has been going on for 20 years, and it's all just in turmoil. Anyone that knows our family, anyone that knows my parents, knows that what has happened is the last thing they would have ever wanted. That we just want what's best for the community. That's why it was sold, so that the community would have a place to go play, to go be with their kids, their grandkids, and that this beautiful land would be preserved. This agreement, really none of us really wanted this giant amphitheater. None of us did. But it is there now, so we just want it to be used. Again, we want it used by Weber High. We want it used by the junior highs. That's what we want for the community. We want it so that it is preserved. And I'm with the rest of my family. I only get on Facebook when somebody says, "Did you read the comments?" And then I'm like, this is why I don't get on Facebook. Because really driving over here, I thought, I cannot believe that everything I was raised, that the Barker name, you don't do anything to disgrace the Barker name. And yet you get on Facebook and it's, I can't believe the Barkers are doing this. I can't, and you're just like, no, that's not what the Barkers are doing. The Barkers really do want what is best for North Ogden City. They have loved this city for over 200 years, and this is where we live. This is why we all are within 20 minutes of the city. Thank you.
We appreciate your comments. Feel free to let us know. And one question that did come up, John, was a conservation easement. And I remember when that came up before the city council. I was on the city council, and it was a long time ago. And when it originally came, in fact, I believe our attorney at that time was Dave Carlson, I think. And the question came up, and could you explain if you know where that went or why it disappeared or what happened there?
So in March-ish, we adopted an easement that the MBA gave to the city, or vice versa. Or no, it was in favor of, I can't, anyways. But essentially says there's no structures that aren't park-related structures to be built on the property, north and south portions. So essentially, it's not a strict conservation easement in that it's being given to a conservation group, like the state has a conservation easement holding entity. It's not given to them, but there are restrictions on residential, commercial, and any public utility buildings except for underground facilities. We just didn't want someone, we build PRV stations, which are basically big concrete boxes put in the ground. If we needed one there, it would be okay because it's underground, and it'd be allowed because it's a, part of our water system, but it wouldn't be an above ground thing, essentially to eliminate the chance of a public works facility being there, for lack of a better example. But also homes and commercial stuff. It's going to be park. And that's what the easement says now. copies of that easement after it was recorded was sent to several of the Barker family members that I had emails for on both the Carl and Lorna and the Ray and Fern side. So.
Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman Stoker, you had a comment?
Oh, I was just wondering, for clarification for my own self, so if F is adopted as an ordinance, does that take away all the, the numbers and the parking and everything else, or does that stay in place till we have
John.
that
So-
season?
So let me pull up the, so this is the entire ordinance that the council passed, I think in June. Let me make it a little smaller. So there's sections A all the way down through H. And so F is just this one little section of the ordinance. And so what that language is would just be amending this tiny section of that ordinance. Everything else about parking, sound, and things like that would still be left as is. It would just be a modification to that one small section of that ordinance.
So everything that that was talked about with the Barkers would be, their concerns would still be
Well,
their concerns would be not be there.
so that ordinance is amending the city ordinance, not the agreement. So everything that was in the ordinance that aligns, tickets per stall, things like that, would still be in effect. It wouldn't change anything. And if the council was inclined to go that direction, then it would obviously come back at a later council meeting with full discussion and all the red lines, so you could see the changes and stuff that were being proposed.
Okay. And in all fairness, too, your names aren't the only ones being slandered out there on Facebook. I mean, I think Facebook is a great thing, but it's awful, and it's also an awful thing. For something that was supposed to be used for good, it always turns into something bad, and so.
I'll face less.
Yeah. So I do feel bad too, and I think I've known Ray and Fern for a long time, and I know your parents and had fun discussions with your mom, and you are a great family. And I feel bad that all of our names are being thrown in the mud. I don't think there's anyone in this room who hasn't been affected by this in one way or another.
Yeah, we're still looking for a motion at this point in time, or?
I
It's up
just
to
have one
what
more-
the council wants to.
One more comment then. So can we still discuss the 1,600 tickets, or is that,
There's,
still discuss that?
I mean, everything is still
Okay.
open for discussion. I mean, that's,
As it stands now, John, unless there was more parking built, we'd be limited to, in this ordinance, we're at 3 tickets per.
No, this one's 4.
the ordinance is 4,
Okay.
but the ordinance only allows internal parking. We don't get to count on-street parking.
Right.
That's where you got 504.
So that's why we're limited to less than 600 tickets right now.
And for example, if we had more space, more tickets to sell, we would have sold more than the roughly 2,980 tickets that we sold for the 6 nights. Because there were times we were turning people away who thought they could come and buy a ticket at the door. So, and then also one thing I forgot to mention is that the agreement as written specifically excludes the city play / musical and the city band from the count. So we could still do another 6-night run or whatever worked. We'd still need to comply with the number of events a week that the ordinance says. So.
Yes, Councilman Barker?
I just want to say, I've read all the emails, seen Facebook. Everyone that seems to be upset about this agreement says that they were part of the community play and they don't want us to hinder it. This agreement does nothing with the community play. It actually makes it better. The community play wouldn't have, if we would have left the original agreement, that you would have had less performances this last year. So this agreement makes the community play better. I also feel the best way to put this, even though the agreement was rushed into maybe back in March, April, May, whenever it was, the way I was raised and the way I was, if you rush into agreement, you still got to follow it. You can't just back out. And so I think as a city, we've rushed into it, but there is a clause that says it'll go until 2021 at the end, and then we'll readdress it. I honestly don't foresee the amphitheater being completed by the end of next summer because we haven't hit the budget year for next year yet, and we don't have the money. So it's not going to be finished next year regardless of our hopes and dreams. So I think 2021 is a great time to maybe come back and readdress this. This is a good starting point. Back in June, we talked about, this agreement right here. And John, you told us that we need to have rules and regulations to limit what the amphitheater is used for. I remember that I didn't want to put a number on decibels because I had no clue what that meant. I tried to toss out 45 or 40 and I was laughed at. So
stick to fire.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just going back to that point. We need to have something in place. Even though we don't have any data, I didn't have any data back in June about decibels, and we had to put something in place, and we'll go from there. I think that's what this agreement's doing the same thing. We don't have any data, but it's going to give us a starting point. And we can come back in 2 to 3 years, end of 2021, or I don't remember the exact date, and we can readdress it. But it's a starting point. So I'm actually in favor of it, and I like Blake's suggestion too of going down to 1,200 tickets max.
Councilman Swanson?
I hear what you're saying, Councilman. I was raised by a father the same way, right. Cowboy, cattle rancher, all that kind of good stuff. The only difference that I see here, and some will obviously say I'm mincing words, but there hasn't been an agreement. There's been a negotiation. Right. There were 2 council members at the meeting, and the council as a whole has to vote, and then there has to be a majority in order for there to be an actual agreement. And do I regret getting into the negotiation sooner than I should have? Yeah. Do I regret what we've learned from it? No, not at all. Do I think it is in the city's best interest to have an agreement at this point? I don't. I think that with the proposal here, this section F, we get essentially the same limitations, and we do it in an ordinance, and we're able to then come back together and whoever's here, right? When that happens, right? Whoever's here, and come together as a community and decide what the best use for the community is. What's a good picture. I think it also gives time for some frayed nerves to calm down, so that we're making good rational decisions rather than emotional decisions. And time, just some time for that to happen as well. So I appreciate all that you say and what you're saying. I just feel differently. Just let me have my backyard fire, okay?
We'll see.
We'll see. Oh, darn it.
So do we need a motion just to postpone?
Technically, you don't need anything if the council's decision is to postpone it. But oftentimes, we do officially table something. But I'm just.
And this might be coming from the Barker side of me. If we're I think we either need to decide tonight whether we're gonna go with the Barker agreement or not. And if we're going to go with this other agreement, and we'll work on that. But I hope I speak for us when I say we're sick of this getting drawn out.
I agree.
So I think either we need to, if we're going to either accept or reject the Barker agreement, and if we reject, then we work on this, or we need something in place. We need some sort of rules, regulations, whatever it is, that says this is what it'll be used for until it's completed.
Make a motion?
I would like to state, though, I I don't want to use the word reject the Barker agreement
Well, no.
because I don't think that's what we're doing here.
Okay, yeah, I understand.
It's
Well,
covered in the ordinance.
Yeah, we'll go under which, yeah.
So, Cheryl, are you gonna?
Do we need some modifications to put this finalized, in a finalized document, or are we ready to do that? Councilman Turner?
So I think the Barker, the agreement that we have here with the Barker agreement, there's some numbers in there that I think we need to relook at. I mean, the 1,600, 1,200, so look at some of those things. But I think currently, since we have this ordinance, I would like to revisit the ordinance and either incorporate the ordinance into the Barker agreement, but at least have something in place, like you said, Ryan, that so we can at least understand what's going in there, and maybe we modify this, because we already have this ordinance already been voted on, and maybe we just revisit that next week or something and go through that piece by piece and add in this provision F if we think that that's the good thing to do, and maybe we even can take the Barker agreement and add some of the things in there to modify this ordinance. And what John said, the difference between, if I understood him correctly, the difference between the ordinance and agreement is last week we voted, or on 2 weeks ago we voted on an ordinance, and then this week we had to change it.
Right.
So if we have at least the ordinance in for another couple weeks until we maybe tweak this agreement, that at least controls what happens at the amphitheater, but then it lets us still get the numbers correct that will make, like, instead of 1,600, 1,200 and things like that. Does that make sense? So I don't know if we, I don't want this to go on either, Ryan, but I think at this point we need to, I agree with you, we need to have at least a motion to say, bring this back to us in a couple weeks, and so we can incorporate it into the Barker agreement, and then we can decide at that time if the agreement is the way to go to protect that property. That make sense?
Did you just do it?
You want to make that motion since you understand it?
So I can attempt to make that motion. So I would move that we, and John, and Annette, you'd have to let me know how quickly we could get this ordinance back to revisit on this amphitheater, if it's next week, or if we have too much next week, or if it'd be the following week. I'd like to revisit this ordinance with this new F, but also incorporate some of the things from the Barker agreement, such as the seating maximum, at least so we get the ball rolling towards the agreement through this ordinance. Man, that was a terrible motion, but that's what I moved. Does that make?
I wanted you to make it.
So, John, how quickly could you guys do that, do you think?
I think the most important thing, if we're going to focus on the ordinance, is get some feedback from the council. This is the first time anybody's seen it except for me. And so I think it's going to depend on how quick that can be done. Next week, our agenda is pretty full. We do have a work session the first week in September, and that might be a great work session topic to finalize the language and then bring it back for an official,
Agree.
Looks like there's too many blue lines in it right now to finish it.
And I'm fine with that. It's just, so we're a couple weeks out to have a work session on it, and then bring it back for an actual vote. But right now, the ordinance is still there to where the amphitheater can be used with what we decided on the ordinance before, correct?
The way the ordinance currently says is it's only city-sponsored events until the council approves otherwise. So as it stands, that's why Tiffany's been telling people they can't even use, that they can't rent the apron from us, because the council hasn't given us any authority to let people rent the apron. So, yeah.
I'm not going to try and repeat your
Ordinance?
your motion, but
Maybe you can
council, you've heard the motion.
I'm going to second it.
We have a second. We'll start the voting with
Can we have a little bit of discussion?
question
first?
or discussion,
Yeah.
yes.
My only thoughts is we can pass whatever ordinance we want, but 2 weeks later we can change it. An agreement you can't change 2 weeks down the road. So it might be great and all, but then, like you said, next year we get 4 new council members. Who knows what's going to happen? So that's that's why I'm a fan of the agreement, because then we're actually protecting the park for 3 years. We know what we're doing.
And I, you know,
But that's just my.
well, and I agree with you too, Ryan, but I just don't know if the agreement's ready. And
Okay.
so
Right.
I'm just thinking,
Right.
in my head, I'm thinking if we can go with the ordinance right now and then tweak that, whatever, and then that gives us a little more time to work on the agreement and get that right. That's what's in my head. That's my intent. I may be wrong at the way I'm approaching it, but that's kind of my intent. Because I was a big advocate for the conservation easement because that really locked it in. And so I'm in favor of if an agreement makes it to where it locks it in. That's my take on it.
That
too.
makes sense.
So we could bring it back September 4th, it sounds like. Right, John?
That would be the
That
work
would be
session.
the next.
How soon could you have perhaps a draft after we've given you some input?
Providing me some input, what I can do is, it would take me a couple hours to just assemble the input into different options
Okay.
of language. So if you could get me something, we'd like to have our agendas out on Thursday, so I'd probably need it by Tuesday of next week.
Okay.
To really get it to Annette's staff in time to get it in the agenda.
Yes.
Yeah, the only concern I have, Ryan, with an agreement at this point is that I don't think we have enough information to lock it in with an agreement, and that
Right.
after this
But-
initial period, then hopefully we'll have a better understanding and feel more comfortable about that we're locking things in where they ought to be locked in, not over,
Right.
not under.
And I'm just thinking, Tiffany said we're not having any plays next year, so that throws out all next year, so then we only have 2 years after that for this, the agreement. And at the rate we're going every other year play, we're only gonna have one more play, so it's not like we're really tying our hands. So either way, I'm I think we're saying potato and potato here.
No, it's tomato.
Oh, okay. That one too.
Any other questions or discussion? We've had the motion, we had a second. We'll begin the voting with Councilman Barker.
So we're voting on this one.
No, we're voting to table to the floor.
Okay, yes.
But I will say
makes
this.
sense, okay.
Can I say this, though? Ask this. And maybe this is repetitive, but I just want to make sure it's clear. So we can still go back and visit the 1,200 versus the 1,600 between the next. Okay, we don't have to vote on that tonight.
No,
Okay.
Councilman Severine,
Yes.
Councilman Turner,
yes.
Councilwoman Stoker,
Yes.
Councilman Swanson.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Counselor, can I say something somewhat selfish on my part right now?
No.
There's a lot of new faces in the audience, and I just want to make it really clear there are 3 Jonathan Calls who live in North Ogden City.
You're the good-looking one, right?
On Facebook I go by John Call, just Jon Call. So I do not endorse or criticize any comments made by anybody else. Just
Doesn't
to
even
make it clear.
comments.
I've had angry phone calls from people saying, "Why would you say such terrible things to me?" And I have to explain to them it's a different person. So, thanks.
Well, I've been handcuffed by the other Brent Shug that lives somewhere here in Ogden, so. Thank you, council. Next item. Discussion and action to consider agreement for library parking maintenance. Presenter will be John Call, our city administrator attorney.
Should we take a 5-minute break?
Okay.
Mayor, I moved to saunter for 10 minutes.
Amen.
We have a motion to recess for 10 minutes.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Since everyone's leaving. Mine too. Mine too.
Pause those for a minute.
Changed my mind. On. I know you guys are really trying to do this right. Oh, yeah. Congratulations.
Sorry about that. Bring trouble by all.
No. I think.
Well, if I had to.
Absolutely can't do this.
Yeah, but I wish I would have thought of it recorded at the beginning of public comments. What we'll do is we'll get. No, you're fine. No, so he'll, because then I could have, we're always trying to upload
I was gonna go run to the restroom.
No update yet, but if you have info, I know Rob actually emailed me today and said, I've got some information, I'm ready to send it to the council meeting and give it to me, so I'll have it soon, and I can...
There's also caravan training. There's like
That's a really long...
told me what the plans were as far as and they do have a facility that we were staying to. Thank you. I appreciate your sticking.
Does the state require you at a certain level of kids to have more people in the house watching them?
Yes. So with 16 kids, I have there's myself, and then I would have another. So it'll be like 8.
And when do you have to get that second person?
I would have to get that person after I get my 8.
And so basically 8 per adult. Okay. Okay.
Unless we need to change it.
Okay. And what's your number? Because then I can, or your email. What's the best?
My email is Kaylee, K-A-Y.
You can't see past it.
E-N-E?
Yes.
Well, they did, huh?
Justin, J-E-S-E-N, @iCloud.com.
Okay. Because what I can do is also have Rob send any information to you. He's our planning director. He's the one who stood up for the grading thing. But that way it'll be easier to keep you in the loop. Okay. Yep.
You can't tell me you can't find it. Okay, I'll call it. I published myself.
These are still on, just FYI.
No, it's nothing bad.
We think you're a good-looking guy. You're the greatest guy we know.
Did you see my comment to John when he said I'm the good-looking one? And I said, well, there's a lot of confusion because people just assume you're always talking about me whether you say good-looking or smart. So.
I have to say it because I work with your brother.
Yeah. Yeah. Now you do again because he's back.
I'm the one who keeps proposing a I'm like, please, just between them, you know, and that'll stop
Well, you know what? Let me pull up my sent items because well, let's see. Scott, right? Parker,
This is
that's
our
who
city
I
engineer, Laura and I.
oh, because I was looking in the wrong folder.
Yeah. Green, the developer? No, he's a developer.
But
they're pro amphitheater, so it's been an interesting.
it's not giving me any of my sent emails. I will find it and send you a copy of the actual what's been reported. That's just easier.
Probably not. But from my house,
But that much when you're right by it's not bad. When you get over the hill. We can't even hear it over the hills. I can't hear anything. I can't hear anything. When they did the Joseph. But this isn't close.
Yeah.
It's like aiming downwards toward the people.
Yeah. Yeah, I will. In fact, I'll find these because I know I've got it somewhere. I'll just have to find it. Hey, thanks.
Had me do some real estate work for him, but I could never find it.
Yeah, nothing's happening.
interesting. Yeah.
But I'm still counting on you for my assignment.
What's the assignment?
I'm going to talk to you.
Okay, bring it.
Yeah.
Right there, where it dead ends, on Deer Meadows Drive.
Honestly, my
We go down to my father-in-law's legacy. That upstairs.
Did you want my sister? Did you?
9 o'clock already. 9 o'clock. We used to, I know.
Left school and go down and see her.
Yeah, I just want to hear about White Rock.
I think
you know.
diabetes ended up getting her because she had so it was on a Sunday. She
Interested
called
in
my
Haltree,
sister
but,
called her and talked
yeah,
to her and
I
said she was sick.
Tomorrow we're going to have at Mountain Valley still a
Sick and threw up enough, the blood sugar went down. And
They are.
get some there. Reaction. Several years
Take care of whatever they do.
They want to found her.
You just tell me what to do with it after it's Or the gator, whichever they come up with. It's a hot potato and I think everybody's not a rural section that is maximize something.
It was hard because I'm not being a religious person, but my sister, you don't, what I think you don't have to, right? Yeah, so, but my mom, I had a connection that night, that I have to go see her. Because I knew she was sick, and she told my sister she didn't want to see anybody or talk to anybody, so I didn't. But I just had that feeling I should have gone to see her. Now I tell my wife, I feel that I just should have gone to see her. You know, he goes, was there to say goodbye. I still pick myself up. So it was hard on me that way. If it's her time, it's her time. In fact, my sister, who happens to be married to Margaret, but she had a dream.
Yeah, I did at one point because my dad's birthday was August 7th, and she died on August 3rd. Yeah, we're going to be reunited forever.
Okay, let's put your hands
Anyway, she was awesome. Yeah. We missed her. Still be.
Thank you, Rod.
I'm coming back.
Oh, you come back? Okay.
I have more I want to say.
Okay. Great. Good to see you tonight. Thank you for your comment. Appreciate you.
Yeah, she, my dad had been gone since for 27 years. So
Good.
she's been by herself for 27 years. That's cool. So you work with Bill and Ken, and was it? Wasn't Wayne Elwell. You didn't work with Wayne.
Comes from you, it's okay.
I can't remember his name. Worked there for 20 years.
I didn't. I only worked there for about a year and a half.
Really?
But I think I was there just before.
Council is kind of time to reconvene.
Then she went left there and went to Washburn. I mean, I went to Smith. I worked at Smith. And Kent was at Smith. So. Yeah, you're in the 9th ward. Now, what was your last name again? Ashdown. Okay. Yeah, you guys were last week. Okay.
Meeting needs to come to order.
That's okay. What
Can you complain about?
Just so you know, Todd. It's the first I heard about it.
Okay, council, we're back in session, and we're on item 9, discussion or action to consider agreement for library parking lot maintenance. This will be presented by John Call, our administrator attorney.
I got one. Thank you.
Council, this is, some of you, I think, were on the council when we entered into the memorandum of understanding a couple of years back. I'll just bring that up to help give a little context to this discussion, if I can. The way this document was conceived and put together was the idea that out in front of our library and the city building, there was a shared parking lot, and the library and the city at the time felt it was appropriate to enter into some sort of a maintenance agreement to outline who's in charge of what and when. The most important exhibit, and it's the wrong way, is this one, which kind of identifies that the way the memorandum was written was the city would be in charge of the short-term maintenance for the parking lot, which would include snow plowing, some crack sealing and things like that, as well as some sidewalk snow removal. And then the library would be in charge of the long-term maintenance for that same space. Now with the revised layout of the facility, well, and probably more importantly, the way the agreement was written, or the memo of understanding, it was supposed to come back to the council and the library for a new revised version of the agreement. The way this was brought to my attention is my wife actually works for the library now, and a comment was made to her about snow shoveling. And apparently, in our rush to get an agreement put together, no one informed Tiffany and her crew that they were in charge of snow shoveling over there in front of the library. So, long story short, I reached out to the library and said, hey, we had this memo. Let's get it finalized, or at least have a discussion to decide if we're going to move forward or not. And so what's come back to you is a proposal. The mayor and I met with the head of the library, the Commissioner Harvey, and their attorney for the library, and we talked about the new facility. The purpose of this discussion, I should say, is this is the first time the council's seeing it. So what I'm really looking for is input on what, if anything, the council wants to agree to, where we want to go, how we want to work this out. The way it's currently written is, if you can see my little pointer, the library will be responsible for cleaning the sidewalk around the library. So their employees would come out and shovel all the sidewalks. The city would be responsible for cleaning all the snow out of the parking lot, both up here and down here. The city would still be responsible for our sidewalks, which are internal, that we've always cleaned. That's kind of the crux of the snow removal. When it comes to maintenance, the city would be in charge of doing some seal coats and crack sealing on all the parking lots and everything. The library would be in charge of the major patching and things that would occur. And then if there was a large section of asphalt that needed to be completely removed and redone, I think the agreement says over 4 square feet, then it would fall on the responsibility of the party who owned the property. So if it was basically directly north or south of the library, it'd be the library that did it. If it was in front of our building or the police building, we would be in charge of it. With that in mind, both Tiffany and Dave are here There have been some concerns that have come up since the mayor and I met with the library about this parking lot is not really well designed, or sorry, it's not that it's not well designed. Snow removal is going to be difficult in these parking lots, in particular because even here where it looks like there's some pass through, that's where the disabled parking or the less abled parking is located, and so you can't push snow through there. So there's going to be a lot of backing up and moving a truck in and out. Tiffany can probably, and Dave can give you a better idea. I know Dave has driven snowplow trucks for a long time. He can probably give you some real clear examples of why it might be problematic. The other thing that's a little hard on this, and something we didn't talk about with the library, was if our plow truck breaks the curb, who pays for it, and how that'll happen, because any plow driver will tell you that a curb's going to get broken by a plow. And especially one where you can see, I mean, there's little islands everywhere and little juts out and things like that. In discussions with the library and snow removal, they understand this is a complicated parking lot. They're fine with snow storage eating up parking spaces and things like that. We have had complaints already about there's not enough parking spaces at this facility. I'm sure that council's probably heard those as well. The other issue that we're going to struggle with in this agreement is timing. The way it's written is the city would be responsible for plowing the parking lot before 6 a.m. As well as any time we resend the cul-de-sac trucks out, because that's the size of truck that would be taking care of this parking lot, is basically our half-ton trucks with a plow on the front. Although some of them are as big as 1 tons, but just your basic Chevy or Ford pickup type of a deal. In my staff report, I identified, I know Roy and I believe Huntsville and Ogden all plow the parking lots of their libraries. For whatever that's worth. Any initial thoughts on this agreement? I'm not proposing this as a, hey, this is everything in stone. It's more of a, let's discuss it and decide if there's something we can agree upon. And I think Tiffany has specifically stayed to answer any questions, because it most likely her team does a lot of the cul-de-sac trucks, and Dave's here as well. So, yeah.
I had a couple of questions. In under B, maintenance provided by city, the one-time type 2 slurry seal and it says city's parking lot. Is that the portion in the lighter gray at the top of the screen there?
Yeah, so it's this piece right here.
Okay, and that's a one-time that we would be doing just because of its condition?
Well, so technically that's already been done.
Okay.
The contractor for the facility, the county replaced a patch in that parking lot, worded alligator is what it's called. And then the contractor who was hired said, well, there's no reason just to do that patch. And they did the whole parking lot.
Nice.
There was a comment that I heard that he had done it for free, and meaning that he'd done the additional parking lot for free. But I think the county still paid for the initial part around the patch.
The other question I had was on number 6. Any replacement on city property? Never mind, I think I just answered my own question. So this really applies to only that portion that's owned by the city, correct?
Yeah, so this is, again, it's right here. It's that 4 square feet.
Right, but it's on city property. It's not on all of the parking lot. It's just that portion that belongs solely to the city.
Right, and the same provisions up here under the library maintenance that says anything larger than 4 square feet they have to do. Just making it clear that it's even.
Right. Okay, that answers my question. Thanks.
Yeah, Councilman Turner.
So you, in your presentation, you talked about we would do one seal coat on a parking lot. Are you talking about the entire parking lot? Because there's a difference between seal coat and slurry.
So what it's saying, or my understanding is what's happened out there already covers the obligation, because it says it's a one-time type 2 slurry on the city's parking lot. So,
but what you said earlier was a seal coat, so you misspoke?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Because I'm not a contractor.
That's okay, that's all right. Is there a difference, Dave? Yeah, I know.
I wouldn't have known.
And then my next question is, there's got to be some type of a warranty on the parking lot and all that other stuff that's provided by the contractor. How does that fit into this agreement for this first year?
So obviously, for example, on the library side, they're really the ones that are taking under the majority of the obligation for the long-term maintenance, which is the potholing and things like that. So the essential breakdown of the material is going to really fall on the library. We'd be in charge of the more short-term maintenance, which for us would really be the crack sealing is going to be the biggest thing we'll have to do in addition to the snow plowing. And so on the library side, we're not going to have a big obligation because if the warranty fails, the library is going to handle it anyways because it's going to fail in a way that they're responsible for, which is kind of the potholes. Although I guess technically crack sealing, if it crack sealed or if it cracked in the next couple of years while it was still under warranty, then the library, I'm sure, would be happy to call their contractor to come back and fix it. I believe it's the same contractor who was it a slurry or a seal, Dave, on out there? Do you know, on our parking lot?
Maybe the slurry.
So it's that same contractor and has been really good to work with. So I think that if there was a crack in the parking lot, they're going to come back and fix it because they're just that type of a contractor under warranty.
Okay, and then you say you have not talked to the library since you rethought about what happens when you break a curb and gutter, and then that they got that Tesla charging station out there. We hit that. And
well, I mentioned
like
it.
That. Is that?
I mentioned it to the attorney in emails back and forth, and he said, "Well, it'd probably make most sense that the person who damaged it fixes it." The biggest issue that I have with that is if we don't hit the curb and the curb breaks, then it ends up being this whose fault is it really? And our drivers, I guarantee you, they will break a curb in that parking lot because it's just the nature of plowing. You especially one like this where there's curbs jutting out everywhere. I mean, they're gonna. It'd be unreasonable to expect them to plow it perfectly unless they did it with snow blowers.
I guarantee they'll know they hit it too, huh, Dave? So I like that. And then the 6 a.m. thing, I see that as a challenge. Now, I just so you know, I don't have a problem with us plowing it. I'm just when we brought this up or when it came in the thing, my concerns was damage, who's going to be responsible, and the 6 a.m. kind of had me a little concerned. Not that I don't know what time the library opens, but the 6 a.m. required in there where there's other areas in the city that are probably a little more important to get plowed out, So I just, that would be a couple of my little thoughts there on it.
So it might be good to have Dave talk about the schedule because typically the folks who are running the streets are not in the same vehicles that are running the cul-de-sacs. And so the idea would be if the cul-de-sacs were turned out, then this would be like first run type thing. But
yeah, so, and he's right. Most of Tiffany's guys actually do the cul-de-sacs. So we can pull off of a cul-de-sac. That's just the biggest problem is if a storm rolls in at 3 o'clock in the morning and we do it one time and the snow keeps coming. I mean, what do you want from us as far as, do you want us to pull out of a cul-de-sac and come back and clean up the library again? Where, when the library is one stretch, we were able to take the snowplow truck with the wing, and those guys would make 2 passes and clean up the whole parking lot. Now we're going to have a cul-de-sac truck, a small pickup going back and forth, and he's right. We're going to hit curbs because you have to buck that, snow back the way that they've designed this. There's no way just to cleanly push it through because of some of the things that they've put in there. So it's just a matter of how.
I think piling snow is going to be a challenge too, where you can put it. So.
Yeah.
Can we make them take their curbs out?
Well, it's even a lot of it's actually a lot of the stops that they've put in there. So not only have they put the islands in weird spots, but they've put where there's not a lot of drive-through traffic. So you're going to have to almost take a plow truck, put it, at a certain point, back drag it, and then turn around and push it a whole different direction. So the biggest thing is time consumption, like how much more time we're going to be taking to plow these two driveways compared to what we used to do when we would put a big wing, big truck down with a wing on it, push it one way, that he'd turn around, come back the other way, and wouldn't be out of there. But
it only really snows on Christmas, though, right?
It's very true.
So you got
at least last year.
And as far as timing goes, so the county's maintenance staff shows up early in the morning, and then they leave by 10 o'clock, which I believe is when the library opens. It's either 9 or 10. I should probably know this since my wife works for them. But that's about when she goes to work. So 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, something like that. The other issue, too, is under this agreement, we would each be responsible for our area, or as far as liable for our area. So if anyone fell in the parking lot and they sued the county, then we would indemnify the county. And if someone fell on our sidewalk and sued us, then the county would indemnify us, meaning they would cover the loss if there was one to be found. That to me is a little scary, because the people who will use all these parking stalls are going to be library patrons. The one exception is when it's court day on Monday afternoon, then the parking lot ends up being a majority of it's full of our patrons. Our patrons is probably the wrong word. Our
courties?
our invitees, the people we've invited to come see us that day. And so it's that type of back and forth. And this is ultimately a policy decision with the council. There's nothing that obligates us to having to follow through on doing this agreement. The only person on the council who's seen it has been the mayor. He was in there, and Dave and Tiffany's crews are, I would say, less than enthusiastic, if that makes sense. But they're also, we can, from a staff perspective, we can do the work. It's just there are some things that'll parking lot. If we do take control of it, there'll probably be one person assigned to it, and that would be the only person who plows it, because they'll know where every one of those stops is that's been put in, and the Tesla station and all that stuff. It's going to be hectic. And then in the middle of the day, you can see there's not a lot of. If you figure that every one of these stalls is going to have a car in it, then you're going to be pushing around kind of in a circle, and I've plowed like one parking lot in my life maybe 10 times, and it's not as easy as you think it should be.
I think since they planned it, they should plow their own.
Oh, yeah.
It's coming out of our budget?
Sure it is.
So they're not paying us back for the county?
Well, so yeah, they wouldn't compensate us for time. The idea would be that somehow the obligations that's being offset, whether in the long-term maintenance of our parking lot, would offset the what you might call temporary maintenance or periodic maintenance of snow plowing. So it's kind of built that way, the agreements, but it's never going to be 100% equal. So
I have two concerns. One, I have real heartburn with the requirement for 6 a.m., which may mean that we have residents who can't get out of their driveways in cul-de-sacs, but we're making sure that people can park at the library.
Before it opens.
What's that?
Before it opens.
Before it opens.
4 hours before it
So
opens.
for me, it would be that the library parking lot gets cleared once our cul-de-sacs have been gone through once. That would be my preference. And the other piece is if you're over at Smith's or Walmart or anywhere else where there's a big parking lot, that it can relatively easily be plowed. And in the middle of a day of a big snowstorm when there's cars parked, there's no plowing that goes on. Once that store is open, there's no plowing that's done. It's done at night when it's closed and the parking lot is virtually empty. I would say we ought to have a similar policy here, that when there's a bunch of cars, the likelihood of clipping a car or breaking a curb, I think, increases dramatically when you have vehicles that our drivers are having to try to work their way around. We get it cleared before it opens, and then once people are in it, I mean, we don't, on court day, if it's snowing hard, we don't go out here and try to replow the parking lot with the wing truck or anything else, because there's cars in the way. And I think we ought to do the same. And I don't like being liable. I guess that was 3 and not 2, wasn't it?
I wasn't counting.
Wheelchair guy, I can't count.
Any other questions, discussion?
Can I-
Feelings?
Yeah, I still don't see why we have to do their parking lot. They should. They designed it. Should be their headache, not ours. We've always been the ugly stepchildren, so I don't like it, period.
Some validity to that.
Yep.
And my plan is to take concerns and just share them back to the library. And I mean, but if, in general, if the council all in a majority agrees with Councilwoman Stoker, is just this, why are we taking on this responsibility? It's probably better for me to let them know that now, so they don't spend a bunch of time back and forth. I mean, if the majority of you feel like there's just no way this will work because we don't want to be in this parking lot for 45 minutes every time we try and plow, then it's better to know that now.
Tiffany, your thoughts? I think I know what they are.
We did a site walkthrough with John and the mayor and Jesse, and we went and looked at this parking lot, and it was poorly designed as far as snow goes. There is nowhere to put the snow because of the pull-throughs and because of the way the parking lot's designed. So one of our major concerns is that we would be pushing snow onto the sidewalks that would then have to be cleared from the sidewalks. And if you'll remember, a couple of years ago when we expanded our snowplow fleet and we changed the way that we did snow plowing, our crews got put out on cul-de-sacs, and it required all of our CDL drivers, everybody in their trucks. And so the order of snow plowing goes cul-de-sacs for our department, and then it goes sidewalks for city buildings, sidewalks for school zones, all the other sidewalks, and then we get to whatever else is left. And so my concern is that if we're putting this, at 6 a.m. or before anything else, or even right after cul-de-sacs, you're pushing off every other sidewalk that needs done. And if there's a heavy snowstorm where you have to pass twice, you're really pushing off your sidewalks. And this is especially your school zones, because that's a hard one for us to keep up with. We've tried to get the best snow blowers that we have, the fastest that we have, but we still don't have a crew for the ever expanding number of sidewalks and parking lots that we're getting. And so it's a big concern for us with the design of it. Before, where we could run a wing truck through it, that was something that Dave's crew with their big trucks would catch on a single pass. This is something that will require multiple passes, and then we may have to plow onto the sidewalk and then take snow off the sidewalk to get it somewhere else so the sidewalks are cleared. So it might not be our responsibility to do those sidewalks, but we'll end up doing them anyway because we're going to be dumping snow on them from the parking lot because there's nowhere else to put it.
And Tiffany's leaving out the fact that she snowplows in the winter when we're running full steam. There's no one in the team.
No, not in the trucks. I'm a snow blower.
So they'll have one person who stays at the office for people who comes in, and everyone else is out running snow blowers and trucks. So it's,
It's not so bad when you have a winter like this last one, but if we get a good couple snowstorms, it will come back to bite us.
So a couple quick questions for Tiffany, maybe Dave. Since you walked it, how are you going to plow this area anyway? So my thought was, you're plowing this area anyway, how hard would it be to plow, and we just tell the library they got to take care of this stuff, but we'll take this pass through here? Would that be fairly simplistic or not?
Oh, it would have been if they didn't put those. I don't know if you can see the islands.
They got islands right here, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So okay. So how would you plow this right now? Would you have to do this with a wing truck, or would you do?
Yeah, we could do that with a wing truck still, because they would be able to wrap that. Because they could come in and wrap all this with the wing truck and wrap it out.
Okay, so that one, okay. My thought was you could possibly go through here, but I understand what you're saying now.
And we can do that too. I mean, if we want to say, hey, we'll do the single pass through there, and then we can open it all up. I mean, it's whatever you guys want us to do, but it'd be better if we could use the wing truck, because it takes it away from all the work that they're doing, and it's one guy doing one pass and getting out of there.
And my thought is on this parking lot out here, this wasn't here before. We didn't plow the skate park before, so that's added work, and I don't, I kind of feel that if we can't do just a little bit to help them, with doing the pass through, then I agree with Cheryl then. I don't know if that helps you at all, John, on my end.
It does, because I feel like that gives me at least enough to go back to them and say, listen, I'm sensing that they're just not, the council's not thrilled about taking over this type of a parking lot. Like before, it was a quick pass or a 2-pass and it was done. And now, I mean, Dave, 30 minutes?
I would say between 30 and 45 minutes.
I mean, that's a lot of.
The lower area?
Huh?
Including this lower area?
No, I'm talking just this area.
You throw this area. This is even. I think this is harder because you only got the. I think you're going to be an hour at least.
So, if you think about how wide a snow plow blade is, 8 feet is about as big as they get, and each stall is 9 feet wide. So you're having to drag every stall out, and it just.
Well,
it's a lot of work.
You say each stall is 9 foot wide, except for 2 in Barker Park. Oh man, I threw a dagger there.
That was awful.
Plowing for 30 years, they're gonna have to designate a couple of them stalls for the snow.
Oh yeah, easily.
So that you aren't backing it, pulling it backwards as much. If they don't leave you a landscape area, you've gotta use your end stalls. They go away in the winter. Put cones up, that's where your snow's stored.
Yeah.
I just say you go back and tell them, no, we're not doing it.
But that's, and the other problem, I see two parties trying to do it, is all one party has to do is make a mistake and flip snow a little too far on the sidewalk, and then the sidewalk person's mad at you because you accidentally made a mistake, so that's a tough, it's better to have one person do it, and then there's not that conflict also. I've plowed for 30 years, I've seen it all.
Okay, John,
There's a lot of salt in them parking lots, and I don't know how you guys feel about salt, but it ruins the asphalt when they never plow over here. Their expenditures is unreal. I think our legal liability is if we show an attempt, we can't get sued. So the library could go out there and go through it a little bit, and come nighttime, that's when it really gets cleaned up.
Okay, John, do you have enough information to take back to the library?
Yep.
Okay. Move on to the next item. Called a major project, discussion or action to consider an agreement with White Rock Development for a debris basin on 3100 near Mason Cove subdivision. Our presenter is John Call.
So, council, this is the second part of the agreement. I thought I had included in the packet a map of the agreement, or of the basin, but it was not included. So let me grab that really quick while I'm talking. But the idea is, or the way this has been proposed to the city is, we received a federal grant for about 80% of the cost, or 75% of the cost. The landowner has committed to cover the city's 25%, and that's the purpose of this agreement, is to obligate the landowner to donate to the city money to cover our portion of the funds for the federal grant. That being said, it's a fairly expensive project. It's about $1.1 million. There will be some cost to the city to carry that, as we talked about when we approved the agreement with the engineer maybe a month back. But the majority of the cost will be borne by the landowner, and the city will essentially get a large debris basin that will help us in the future. when another storm event happens. There were some comments earlier about the idea that that it's a 100-year storm, and Lauren's here. He can tell you what a 100-year storm is, because it's kind of a technical engineering term, and it usually doesn't think what we think it means. So, Lauren, could you maybe explain what a 100-year storm means?
1%.
It really doesn't mean that a storm's going to happen once every 100 years. It means that the chance that it will happen is 1% chance in any given year. Because, and you could have multiple 100-year storms in 1 year, because the odds of it occurring is only a 1%, one time in 100 happening in that given year. So you could have back-to-back 100-year storms, but all it means is that it's going to be of a significant level. It's like a 200-year is a 0.5% chance of happening. So, and this debris basin is not a single basin, but it's, as you see, there's 3 different ones, and it will be tiered down to help with the topography, but also help in slowing the debris and catching it, and better work with the topography that we have out there also. So now that I've totally confused you, so.
Well, John?
Clear as engineering.
Yes.
So that everybody understands, where is this basin at? Could you give it northeast?
So if you are on 3100 North headed up the divide, as soon as you essentially leave the city limits, or if you were to drive straight into the hillside, like you were headed just straight down 3100 North, it's the hill, it's right in front of you. So that is, this is the curve that's 3100. And then once you get about to here, you're on county property, so it's before you hit, or county jurisdiction, it's before you get to the trailhead that's on the divide road, right where that hard right is as you're headed up the canyon. So right as you start gaining elevation, it would be on the left-hand side of the road, right here.
Mason Cove is just to the corner up there on that upper left-hand corner.
Yeah. And the other thing, so we'll include this in the packet or attach it to the agenda. And just so no one gets any concerns, and all of this hasn't been approved, all these lots. The idea, though, is that this basin is here to protect the downhill homes. I think one of the individuals mentioned they're one of the homes that lives along here, and their home was actually knocked off the foundation back in '91 when this happened. So that's part of the reason that we got the grant from the feds, is the potential for something catastrophic, and then this basin will significantly minimize the risk. It won't eliminate it, but it'll greatly reduce the chances of that type of a event taking houses out, even with houses now coming closer to the road or to the basin. But there's no guarantee that it won't happen. So.
Questions or discussion, council?
And Evan is here. I'm not sure if he has anything that he'd like to add, but the way this would work is we would get billed from the engineer or the contractor when the work was being done, and then we would send a request out to White Rock and the landowner, and then they would wire us the money to our funds, so that in theory, we wouldn't actually have to expend funds, because that can happen within the 30-day windows of when we have to get our invoices back out or pay our invoices. So, but Evan wasn't expecting to say anything, but if you have any questions about that, he can provide some insight.
You have an agreement number?
Yes, it's A16-2018.
16?
Yep, yes.
Mayor, I'd move that we approve agreement A16-2018, approving the agreement with say it 10 times, White Rock Development for a debris basin on 3100 near Mason Cove subdivision as discussed.
We have a motion.
Second.
I have a second. Any other questions or discussion?
I just, John, what is our, you say we have a grant and that White Rock is going to reimburse us. Let's hypothetically say they go out of business, they don't have any money. Then are we on the hook?
Under the federal grant, we would be on the hook for the basin. But the way we can record this agreement against the property once it's signed, so then whoever bought the property would be obligated to reimburse the city for that expense.
Okay.
Would that be the 291,565?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions or discussion? Okay, we'll begin the voting with Councilman Severie,
Yes.
Councilman Turner,
Yes.
Councilwoman Stoker,
Yes.
Councilman Swanson,
Yes.
Councilman Barker.
Yes.
Motion passes.
And council, one other item that it's probably a good thing to mention since we're on it. What we're trying to do now is anytime there's something that the city is doing that's going to cost more than $500,000 and it's going to be discussed on an agenda, we're going to give it this bold title that it's a major project and to try and draw a little attention to it, as well as we're also planning on at our monthly work session meetings giving a quick update on all the major projects that are in the future, just so council gets monthly updates on where we're at, even if it's just to say, hey, nothing's changed from last month, we're still waiting for the environmental study to come back, but just so the council gets regular updates on those larger projects.
Okay, the next item, discussion on the intersection of 1050 East and 3100 North. Presenter is Blake Severing, council member.
I'll make this very quick. I had several citizens contact me about the safety, 1050 East and 3100 North. Those of you who maybe pass that way frequently know that it can be a treacherous intersection. But our able-bodied Dave Espinoza at Public Works has added some additional signs, thinking that perhaps if people knew that it was not a four-way stop, they would be more cautious. So we're going to see what happens.
Okay.
And also, there's some information on that. The police department says they have, for the past several years, they've had 4 accidents a year at that intersection. Most of them, or I asked them if they were failure to yields or if they were people that just completely missed the stop sign. They didn't have that information. But he did say, Lieutenant Crowther, when he was up there, that he actually witnessed somebody who came to a full stop and then pulled out in front of someone thinking it was a 4-way stop. So when he was up there looking at the intersection,
And there's probably both. My family personally have had people come to a stop, start out, and then realize it wasn't.
Yeah.
And we have had people just blow through the intersection like it was, like there were no stop signs.
Many moons ago, it was a 4-way stop. Remember that?
It's difficult to have a four-way stop because of uphill.
So, yeah, many years ago, it was a 4-way stop.
It would be nice, though, if we could maybe direct the police department to maybe spend some time up there, though. So people seeing it more, especially right now with the beginning of school.
okay.
So I think that would be a good thing. John, if you could do that for us, please.
It seemed like we were talking about some flashing lights that would say stop ahead or...
Yeah, we looked into those too. We tried this one first, and so what it just says that, I can't remember what the verbiage is, but it basically says it's only a 2-way stop. To see if that works. If it doesn't, I think that's our next option is put, stop ahead signs along 3100, coming eastbound and westbound there.
I seen some signs over at Pleasant View saying that through traffic doesn't stop or something of that nature, so.
I still like the bollard idea.
What?
Automatic bollard, you don't stop. These big barriers pop up and make you stop.
Okay.
We're going to get more than 4 traffic accidents a year.
That's right.
So thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Councilman Severine. Item 12, discussion or action to consider an ordinance annexing property located at 1500 East and 2750 North. Hall Tree Subdivision Phase 17, 18, and 19. This will be presented by Annette Spenlove, our city recorder.
Council, we brought this to you July 10th. There was a public hearing held that day. And at that time, we didn't have the recommendation on a zone from the Planning Commission. The petitioners requested a R110 zone, and the Planning Commission is recommending a R110 zone. So this property located at 1500 East, 2750 North is part of the Hall Brothers Hall Tree development. Anyway, that is the zone the Planning Commission has recommended and the petitioners considered, and there's an ordinance before you to consider this annexation so we can get it recorded with the state.
Is the rest of their development R110?
Yes, so all this here is R110.
Okay.
And that's what they're proposing is more of that same.
Ordinance number?
2018-18.
I'll make a motion that we approve ordinance 2018-18, the Hall Tree annexation phases. Sorry, I'm looking real quick again. Whatever.
17, 18,
17, 18,
17, 18, and 19.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. We'll begin. Any other discussion or questions? Begin the voting with Councilman Severie.
Yes.
Councilman Turner.
Yes.
Councilwoman Stoker.
Yes.
Councilman Swanson.
Yes.
Councilman Barker.
Yes.
Motion passes. Last item on the agenda is public comments. Meeting is now open for such.
Yeah, I guess I wasn't aware that there'd been any public comment on the debris basin before it was all designed and everything. Does that meet the criteria of the past storms? Did you guys see, did the engineer follow what recommendations where we've got an unknown party paying to do that? Well, he could do any kind of thing below and say, hey, city, you're obligated because I paid into this pond for that. What's this pond designed? I've never seen a public meeting, anything.
Excuse me, can we get your name and address again, please?
David Skeen, 3068 North, 1375 East.
Thank you.
I think what
I've got a lot of history and a lot of knowledge in this, and I didn't even see a design. I didn't see any cubic yardages. I didn't see what kind of holdback strength it would catch. Are you voting on something you know is going to stop the debris out of a canyon, or are you voting on just a catch basin?
David, you were lucky that Lauren just walked in. He might be able to address that question.
That design is not finalized yet, and they are working on it. But the intent is it's going to handle all of the debris that come out of there on that given size storm. Okay, so, but there hasn't been a design completed, and that's what the engineer for the previous agreement is working on to accomplish.
That right there just doesn't seem right to me whatsoever, that you can agree on a price and the debris basin isn't designed yet. I'd need to take a solid look at a debris basin and see what the designing is to be able to say I'd spend $1 million on it. I would recommend you wait till it gets done. You voted yes on it, but I'm not satisfied with it. I don't think anybody know what they voted on. The cubic yardage is, it's not even complete, and you voted it in.
Thank you for your comment.
Brenda Ashdown, 193 East Pleasant View Drive in North Ogden. I want to thank whoever I spoke to, Dave Espinoza, before the meeting. We spoke last week and asked about landscaping across the street from the city shop. And I spoke to him tonight, and he told me what the plans are. I appreciate that. I appreciate the follow-through with that. The other concern that I have is that we did speak last week, my husband and I, and our opinion is that we are not in favor of the gondola unless a lot more information is given out. And the next day at work, someone approached my husband, who lives next to a city councilman, who apparently was not happy with our comments that were made, and that their opinion is that it's a good thing for the city. We all have a right to our opinion. I have no problem with that, but I ask you as city council people, before you advertise your opinion, or that you get a little more information about exactly what it is, and maybe not say derogatory remarks about people who make comments at city council meeting. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Okay, I had 5 minutes prepared. I'm only going to take 1 or 2. Rod Barker, 2524 Barker Parkway. I have renewed respect for you. You just took 30 minutes talking about how to clear a parking lot of snow. What a job you have. An aesthetically beautiful, horrible Utah design parking lot, isn't it?
No comment.
I wanted to share a couple of little quotes that I heard. I used to work in the church office building in Salt Lake, and as such, they have a leadership enrichment series that they present every 3 months. And it's designed for, Mayor, maybe you went to some of these, managers and directors in the church office building, and I had the privilege of going to them at the time that I was there. I want to share an experience that Elder Don R. Clark shared. And again, this is for not necessarily church leaders, but managers in the church as a business. Don R. Clark mentioned this. He says, when I was younger, I didn't take much feedback or correction very well. I eventually became assistant to the president of a big company. Dick Batram was my boss. And Dick Batram and I became very close. I helped him and he helped me. I used to get exceptional on my performance reviews. One day I was having my performance review. So anyway, I was in for my annual review, and he went through it and gave me exceptional rating. He gave me a good increase, and then he took his book and he opened it and he said, I have a couple of suggestions for you. And I'm sure I must have pulled a face. He started to tell me how I should help manage one lady that worked for us. I was fed up to hear with her. She was really artsy, you know. And it was a full-time job just keeping her organized. So he gave me these 2 suggestions. And I said, yeah, but. He took his book, he closed it. He looked at me and he said these words that forever changed me. He said, I was just trying to help. He walked out of the room. Now I was just there alone. I knew Dick Batram cared deeply about me. I made a determination that day for Don Clark that never, ever would anybody correct me again and me not listen? Never, ever. And I just find that a fascinating story. This man who became successful in business. I appreciate what I've seen tonight, by the way, as you've listened to and I think gave consideration to public comments. And that said, I just have a couple other things I just want to mention that kind of tie with that. May I just suggest, it's been said before by others, it's time to rethink the Brent Taylor discussion page. Why? There's bullying. It's divisive. And it seems to be restricted to only one-sided thinking. It's divisive at a time when we need a unifying voice in our country and in our community. Opinions dissenting from the moderator's opinion are often deleted. True leaders Leaders seeking to serve all the people should welcome opposing opinions, not silence them, not delete them. From my experience, leaders make better decisions when they see issues from all angles. And one last thought I want to share with you from one of these Leadership Enrichment Series talks that I heard. I know that he's a church leader, but it was given more of a business leader type thing. But I find this a very powerful quote. This is by a man named D. Todd Christofferson. And he said, "There have been great leaders in the past, as you know, political and otherwise, that have accomplished great things, but they left in their wake a lot of broken people. And the Savior was just the opposite. He left in his wake people who were edified and built up and strengthened and made better in the process." I just think that is food for thought. Many great leaders who leave people who are broken behind them. But those who are the best leaders always build and edified and lift. And I'll just leave that with you, and thank you for your service.
Thank you for that comment.
I guess I can't help myself. I'm sorry. Sean Casey, 2444 Barker Parkway. I wish I had Rod's style, Aaron Christensen style, my dad's style. Unfortunately, I don't. I agree with Rod's statement about not breaking people. And people in position of power should definitely go out of their way not to break others that are less in position than they are. The main reason the amphitheater is an issue is the main reason the Brent Taylor Facebook page is an issue. I believe it is a fundamental freedom. If you censor someone's ideas or actions, you are censoring their thoughts. It's why oligarchs for all of history have tried to control communication and how you express yourself. And that's why the United States is so great, is because we have nearly unlimited political speech opportunity. I don't think it should be shut down. I think Brent Taylor should have whatever he'd like to have, and anybody else too, when it comes to political speech. And the same is true with their voice with entertainment. People should be able to express themselves. I love Mahler. He's doom and gloom. I love Wagner. He was a socialist in the worst way. But I love his music. I love all kinds of music. And when we throw around reading the Brent Taylor Facebook page, which is blowing up today, you know, my wife handing me her phone and saying, "Read this." And I stand to the side because it sounds like crap. And right there, I can't stand it. But it is... It's necessary for people to be able to think and be allowed to think. And Thomas Jefferson, as I have studied, I wasn't there, wouldn't sign on for our Constitution without the Bill of Rights. He said, "I won't do it." And Tom Paine and Tom Jefferson are responsible for our First Amendment. And it is tied up pretty tightly with freedom of religion, freedom of expression, freedom of assembly. I don't know what we're going to do with the amphitheater. We have built it. I mean, Brent Taylor says in his Facebook pages that it's not built out like I say it's built out. It really is built out. It's bigger than Ogden City, and Ogden City's fire marshal says it'll hold 8,500 people. And ours is significantly bigger. And it's 400 amp service. And the Gallivan Center in downtown Salt Lake is 100 amp service. How do you restrict this? We're going to have a parking lot. We're going to have an amphitheater. And to hear you guys say city-sponsored content, all I can think of doing is walking down the aisle with an ostrich mark and a brown shirt, you know, and talking about the new National Socialist Party. It's really wrong. So what we can do is we can limit time, place, and manner, which we've been talking about. But we should not talk about content, because you all probably like the Beatles or Elvis, and at one time that was Satan's music. And what I like is not what you like, and vice versa. We've had that story. What we could do is we could rip the transformer out and we could make it a passive amphitheater. And we shouldn't build any more until we solve this problem, our free speech problem. We have a big one. The rest are details. So I would say you tackle this at a fundamental level. Think about that and how. Because Randy is a Constitutionalist Party member, I think.
I'm a member of a party, but a Constitutionalist.
So I thought, yeah. And I hope, why is America, the United States, so great? Is because we had moral philosophers and political philosophers that designed our nation. And I know this is about 5 minutes up. But I think if it's great because they tackled it at fundamental levels. And I think there are some things maybe that we could do to make the amphitheater successful. We humans have gone in recorded history a long time without loudspeakers. I mean, I sell loudspeakers. I design loudspeakers. I've done shows all over the world. I kind of know what we're getting into. So does Christy McBride, who runs the Ogden City Amphitheater. And she does a great job. And she doesn't sponsor content. I don't know what to do. I do appreciate that you did spend so much time talking about snow removal. And the first time I came, which was less than a year ago, Cheryl went to battle on a propane tank size for Ace Hardware. Your job is hard. You're expected to be an expert on every topic. I am sorry that I have called you dumbasses, because you have a hard job.
Thank you for your comment. If there's no other comments, we'll have discussions from council. Councilman Turner.
I have nothing.
Councilman Severy.
Nothing.
Councilman Barker.
I've only got one thing. I had a farmer text me this morning. He got a ticket last night for baling hay after 10 o'clock. Well, the police officer said he needed to come to the city council and get a permit to bale hay after 10 o'clock. And I told him it was ridiculous.
I thought maybe ag was exempt, but we'll check on that.
That's what I thought. Agriculture was exempt, and he's allowed to do that.
You related to the farmer?
In a roundabout way.
You're related to everybody in a roundabout way.
Well, he's a North Ogden farmer, but yeah. I don't know if we need what we need to do with to make sure our police officers understand the farmers can bale hay after 10 o'clock. The farmer was there long before houses were there.
I was wondering if it was your dad.
Nope, it was not my dad. My dad will not bale hay.
So Ryan, I think there may be an ordinance that says they can't bale unless they get a. I thought there was, but maybe there's not, and maybe we ought to.
And that's why I brought it up with. I don't know. I thought agriculture they can because the best time to bale hay is when it's dark.
Yeah, I know, and we've had farmers come in before and asked if they could bale early in the morning and stuff, and so I thought maybe there was, but maybe there's not. Maybe we can look into it and see if there is.
Annette remembers an ordinance like that. I vaguely do, but I think it. The other thing that also depends on what they cited them for, because our ordinances can't trump state ordinances. So if there's a state provision that says they can do it whenever they want, then that would trump anything we try and do. But if there's a state provision, the best one the one they use most often is disturbing the peace. If they feel that it's even if it follows city code, it breaks state code. So it kind of depends on what they wrote them up for too.
Well, and I think he just got a warning and said, "Come talk to the city council," and so I got a message.
Okay.
Which he's on county property, so there's
so he's not subject to our exception then.
He's he's county. Yeah, he's one of the unincorporated county islands inside the city limits.
Okay.
So I just said I'd follow up since I knew we had council tonight.
Okay, we'll check on that.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Swanson.
That's why we hire attorneys.
Right.
For those kinds of things. Couple of things. With the increase in public involvement in our meetings, which is wonderful, by the way. It's nice to have people here on a regular basis, more than we've ever had. I do think we need to get a timer for public comments so that individuals know when they're reaching their 5-minute limit. I know we had one comment last week that lasted 20 minutes. And it's, I think it's easier, less intrusive, less rude, or whatever you want to call it, if we've got one of those timers up there. John, if you could look into that, so that we have it and everybody knows when the 5 minutes is up, and that way we don't have 20-minute comments. I did quite a bit of reading this last week on this ranked voting thing. And I'm grateful for Ricky Hatch's comments that he made, because I haven't seen anything except in a very, very few places where anybody that's tried it has hung on to it and liked it. It doesn't do what, and it's not something I'd be in favor of. Peggy, your comments on earlier tonight about the park becoming a parking lot for the amphitheater. I'll just say that'd be over my dead body, and that's why I'm actively working with finance and with our elections official to get a bond issue put out before the voters and let the city decide whether or not we want a bond and get that park finished so that it is a park and nothing else, so that there is no worry going into the future. Will it be paved over for a parking lot? It'll be a park and a splash pad and the tree houses and everything else that are on that design that you have framed. So that's in the works. Evan is working on it, has sent me some information. I've asked for some additional information. I've spoken with Annette on what the possibilities are for a special election to get that done sooner rather than later, and so there'll be more information coming on that. As we're looking at stop signs, the stop sign at 800 East and 3200 North. John, this one's for you. We've talked in the past about, it just seems weird the way they have that stop occurring on the north-south instead of the east-west. Mm-hmm. In the wintertime, it's virtually impossible to get a start going back up that hill once you've stopped at that stop sign. So if we could look at that. And then last but not least, unless Cheryl wants me to go on more.
Sure, go
Okay.
for it.
I've got 10 other then. At 450 in Alberta, Dave, thank you for getting those gradated markings that help people see the crosswalk there. On the north side of that funky intersection there at Alberta and 2850 and Washington /422.5 or whatever it is right about there. As you're coming up the hill, it's impossible to see somebody standing at that crosswalk, even if they have the little orange flag. And so I've asked Dave to look into what it would cost us to get those flashing sidewalk signs that can be user activated so that people coming up the hill and down the hill can see that there's somebody there. It'll draw your attention and hopefully keep somebody from getting killed there. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Councilwoman Stoker?
Just a rebuttal. I think a timer's tacky. I would not be in favor.
Well, it's either a timer or one of us that has the responsibility to say you've got 15 seconds.
That's the mayor's responsibility, but I don't like the idea of a timer. But other than that, thanks everybody. I have no comment.
You want to wrestle?
I echo, thank you for coming this evening. There's been some great discussions, and the civility with this group has been fantastic, and I hope we can start burying some of the hatchets that are out there so that we can become a united city again and enjoy friendship and the things that we are blessed with here. So thank you all for your participation this evening. John?
Just a scheduling thing for the council. And this goes to the discussion of the detention basin property, or the future detention basin property. Talking with the mayor and stuff, we think it might be good for the council to approach the design of the pond in a separate meeting from the agreement on whether to purchase the property. And that's in part because it seems like the overarching safety concerns are muting out the other questions that come up with the double out ranch agreement, which is density and things like that. And I just don't want the council to miss something it's that important. I mean, density is an important thing. And so if the council's okay, what I'd propose is that we bring the agreement back for the purchase of the property next week, and then the pond agreement at some point in September, or the pond design concept. I know, but that's also can be hard on the people who are interested in both of those topics, because now they have to come to 2 meetings. So whatever the council would like to do, I just want to, make it. I mean, the other idea is maybe we could do one at the beginning of a meeting and then have a couple items and then do the other, although your public comments are all at the beginning of the meeting. I'm just trying to make it easier for us to focus on all the important issues instead of having one issue hold the whole conversation. I don't know, what does council think about?
I think there are some meetings that Cheryl and Blake are going to be involved with before that can happen.
Okay.
Well, we can bring the agreement back to purchase the property.
Yeah, do that separately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then.
Okay.
Because we need a
can
detention
actually have
basin
more
anyway.
property before we, yeah.
Okay.
John, do we know yet what's the status of the grant?
So,
Huh?
it'll be November. So, as I've explained, so the way it works is, it's kind of a three process or 3-piece award. You get the first award to the environmental study, the second award to do the design, and the third one to do the construction. In November, we'll actually know if we get the last 2 pieces, which is design and construction, as one lump sum. So we did get the award for the environmental that's been completed, and then we'll know in November for sure if the other one's coming through. Everything looks like it will come through, but that's based on the environmental study.
So there has to be, it sounds like there won't be an option just to have a park. There will be an element of it that has to be a water park.
Well, so
A water feature.
the state guys and the Fed guys won't define what recreation means for us. So in the grant, it says you have to have 2 of the 3 components, which is water for irrigation, a water detention facility, and a recreation component. Right now, our project has all 3. But no one will give us a firm definition on what recreation means to the people who are making the decision on the grant. So that's kind of the issue that's out there. We're confident that the water park, for lack of a better word, that the water feature meets that standard because they approved it when they approved the environmental. But if it was just a field for something else, that's
Okay.
But anyways, that'll be discussed more as we get to that design meeting, whenever that is appropriate to have that come back.
Okay.
Then the last thing, we did do a field trip up to the top of the city. Several of the council members were able to come. Several of the planning commissioners were able to come. We'd like to do another one for those of you who couldn't. So we'll have, or those who want to go again. And just for those who don't know, we're basically going all the way up to the debris basins that are above the cove. So it's about as high up in the city as you can go. Basically where the Bonneville Shoreline Trail comes across the top of the city, we'll actually go a little bit higher than that, assuming that the gates are unlocked, as we keep running into problems with people locking gates in inappropriate ways. So, but we'll get that figured out. So just know that we'll be sending out another email. And for the public's benefit, that the public can attend them. It'd be helpful if we knew who wanted to come with us, so that we could coordinate for people to fill the cars that we have, so that we're not taking private vehicles up there. We're taking city vehicles would be the preference. That's it. That's what I've got.
Okay. Annette?
I don't have any.
Okay. Any comment? Dave? Evan? Thank you.
I got one thing that just to remind everybody, the Chalk Art Festival is this weekend. Friday night, they'll be down there setting up. The artists will start. We actually, Cheryl, if I remember right, we have 4 or 6 feature artists.
4
feature artists. That's what they do. They're professional chalk artists. So, and it's down there by kind of behind Kurt's and the True Value Hardware in that parking lot down there, and it'll be all day Saturday. It's free to the public. There'll be food trucks there, and
food trucks are free.
Bands, no, food trucks aren't free, but they'll be there for you to enjoy. So
I know.
5 o'clock judging.
Yes.
Right, Cheryl.
Yes.
Please come down and watch it. It's
You're
pretty
going to
amazing.
show us the featured artists?
Pardon me?
You're going to show us which ones are the featured
Oh,
artists?
yeah, you'll know which ones
okay.
are.
They might win otherwise.
Hey, council, entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.